So it looks like we found ourselves on a mountaintop now. I'm super excited to be here again, and now we are no longer on the moon. We are on a mountaintop again. My name is Max Harberg. I'm the strategist at Offbeat Media Group, and Christopher Travers, the co-founder and chief creative officer. We've talked a lot about virtual humans, and we're super excited to dive back into it. But I guess a question that we've talked about over the past couple days, and honestly months and weeks and years. Who are your favorite virtual influencers in the space?
Yeah, some of my favorite virtuals would have to start with little Michaela. Kind of the cornerstone of the space was propelled by her presence online. 2016 is when she came online. 2017, 2018, we started to see a lot of news reporting about this individual. She's a virtual character, CGI. She has two friends named Bermuda and Blocko. And in effect, what makes Michaela so special is she, I guess, captivated the world. Like that, she was the turning point, right? That ignited a lot of growth. And so I really love that about what Brood has accomplished in creating her. There's also this fascinating virtual influencer named Nobody Sausage, which I just think is absurd, where it's a dancing literal sausage that dances on TikTok and has captivated tens of millions of people through that. And it's so simple, and I think the message is that any being can influence anyone, and it comes down to the message that you send behind it, right? And so the Nobody Sausage, even though you look at it, you might laugh and think this is all for play, they talk a lot about mental health and other things like that. So then we can't not mention Hatsune Miku. Hatsune Miku was made in 2007, and she's this 2D character that is open source, where anyone can create content with this being. So you can go and make a song and say it's made by Hatsune Miku. You can go and you can release personas like a group maybe that are Hatsune and friends and whatnot. So Hatsune Miku is just such a cornerstone virtual influencer that I look up to a lot.
One thing that was super interesting about that is, you're talking about like the typical person and like why like Nobody Sausage is such a big deal. You mentioned two TikTok stars actually yesterday during the main stage that have now decided to take on personas as virtual influencers.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the two sisters that decided to do that?
Sure. It's interesting. I don't know if they've necessarily taken on personas, but the D'Amelio twins, right? Globally famous twins. Sorry, they're not twins. Sorry, they're sisters. But the D'Amelio sisters are famous on TikTok. Hundreds of millions of followers, I believe, and fans across other platforms. But what's interesting is they've released Squeaky and Roy. Squeaky and Roy are their stuffed animals that also dance on TikTok and are now growing a following and sometimes appear in their content. And so it's interesting that these sisters who have built such a fandom are already taking the side step to transition their fandom to a new property, almost as like an insurance policy to the future and to the inevitability that comes with growing older and changing platforms. So you yourself have a limit, right? You are limited as a human, and that's just a state of life, where you will die someday, right? You will grow old, and in media, I find we value, beauty, right? And typically youth, right? But that's also kind of self-fulfilling in that the youngest generation is defining what's next in media, and so what they value becomes popular. But what I'm really getting at is, as this insurance policy to you yourself eventually aging out of influence, you could say, you can today, while you have influence, create personas, shift your fandom to multiple personalities, you could say, even though that sounds kind of crazy. You effectively can shift your fandom to multiple media properties that you direct. And then when you yourself age out, the IP that you create can actually live on in relevance as the same image for potentially forever, even after you die.
I mean, isn't that kind of scary? I mean, sometimes I think about that, and that it's a little interesting that I could theoretically live on forever. And how do you make that like positive? Like, how do you make sure that's not like a scary thought with people?
I don't know. I think if you're going to create life in media, you have to accept the constraints of life. Like, the reality is that, like, I'll say it, we're all going to die someday, right? And so when you create media doesn't die. you know? And so when you create human media and as these lines kind of blur and you start to create very human media and eventually like packing AI behind some of this media, you start to in effect create like eternal life. And that's maybe a controversial concept. And I won't say that what you create in media with AI is equivalent to life in any capacity. You can get close, you can emulate, but there's a lot of fiction, there's a lot of constraint and laws, of course. But hey, you know, you could watch this video in 500 years and question if I was onto something, who knows? But I don't know where the technology will be.
Well, one thing that like, talk about fiction, talk about fantasy, why is Nobody Sausage so influential? Like what makes virtual influencers and virtual beings so influential? It's a sausage.
I actually would love to talk about a friend of mine who made FN Mecha. The creator of FN Mecha introduced me to this concept called glance value. And I hadn't really realized how important that is. It's so fundamental to everything you consume on social. It is the power of a piece of media when you scroll in a feed for it to capture your eye. You know, like the sparkle, the thing, whatever it is. It could be a color, it could be movement, it could be something. But the glance value of your media actually has a huge impact on click-through rate, retention, all these things that the algorithm praises and bases media off starts with the glance. And so he was telling me about basically how virtual influencers and virtual beings have crazy high glance value because when you scroll through, it hits you with the, what is this? You know, like, that doesn't look right, or that's colorful, that's strange, that's new, that's novel, that's virtual. And in effect, we're in a moment right now where a dancing red sausage has insane glance value. And it captivates you, and believe it or not, by the time a minute goes by, you've watched a video, the algorithm is just firing on all fronts saying, whoa, 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 people like to look at this, show it to more people, that drives more fans, it shows it to more people, it's viral, right? Glance value drives virality.
What are the best platforms for virtual influencers? I know, like, we've talked a lot about TikTok, Instagram, but there's a big one that is on Twitch and streams live.
Yeah, you know, it really depends on the medium you target. I like to talk about virtual influencers as they can have glance value on any given platform. There's this premise of transmedia. I didn't even know about this until a few years ago, or maybe you know about the idea but you don't know the definition, is the concept of posting on multiple platforms, you yourself on multiple mediums, or for instance, when Marvel was releasing their new film, they made sure to have a transmedia approach. They were firing on all cylinders, hitting on all platforms. That's transmedia. And so some virtual influencers who master the video medium will choose, it's like you pick your funnel, right? Pick your approach, pick your ingredients. And a lot of these virtual influencers, some might Twitch stream and then clip out to YouTube, and the YouTube videos go viral, and that feeds the Twitch stream. And that is the viral loop. So a lot of these virtual influencers are constructing these viral loops using transmedia. A funnel that is very successful right now is TikTok videos, link in bio to a YouTube experience that just, if you can succeed on TikTok with the videos, have a video go mega viral, people click through to your profile, click through to your YouTube, subscribe, that's the funnel, right? And what you post in the video medium, it's up to you to captivate them from there. But TikTok is just this like powder keg of opportunity where if you can blow something up, you can just inject fandom into whatever property you direct them to. And I've seen that in the past 2 years. I've seen it time and time and time again of entire podcasts being defined by their TikTok strategy. But it's their TikTok funnel. It's not about TikTok, right? I actually know that most TikTokers struggle to monetize in many ways, and we actually work with TikTokers to help them monetize. But what I'm getting to there is the value of a fan on TikTok is much lower than a value of a fan on YouTube or Instagram because it's fleeting. You watch hundreds of videos on TikTok. So you really need to understand that a value of a fan on TikTok right now, you need to figure out how to captivate them repeatedly with a limited attention span. So that's where captivating trends is actually a really way to a really good way to tap in with the TikTok fan is to create a trend that they latch onto and want to revisit, right? Or create a persona that has high glance value so they keep coming back. So that's why I really think TikTok's big potential for virtual influencers, and also as like a top of the funnel approach for any link in bio that you want to send them to.
Sure, and you talk about transmedia, and I read a really interesting book, The Art of Immersion. I had you read it.
He introduced it to me, and then I read it.
It's a great book if you want to like learn more about like transmedia. And one thing that I find really interesting about it is it goes all the way back to, if you're familiar with the show, like The Office. Just say any TV show, your favorite TV show out there, your favorite movie, and the idea that fans created Twitter accounts to pose as the characters. And at first, the shows, the companies, the entertainment, the production freaked out a little bit. They were trying to figure out kind of how, like, would they, get in trouble with copyright? Like, do they give the fans control? They realized that giving fans control actually help bring these characters and these shows and movies to life. So, like, what type of person do you see making these virtual humans? Like, is it a shared team all the time? Is it someone who wants to base it off of a movie or a show, or are they coming out with this random idea? Like, what is the type of person that would make a virtual being, a virtual influencer?
That's really a really good question. There's a lot. It really comes into your approach, right? There's a few. I'll talk about two camps, okay? The fashion interested camp is a big one. So you see a lot of photographers coming in who've spent years maybe photographing models and who got inspired about the potential of creating virtual influencers, or who've just loved the idea of virtual fashion and fashion in general, and want to move to a virtual space. But then the team, like studios, creative studios that work in fashion. That's a group that I've seen quite a few coming out and creating virtuals from. The other camp is just gamers and like tech-oriented people who were raised playing video games, who just really love the ins and outs and the edges of video games. Like, what makes a video game tick? Why does it work this way? So more tech-inclined, and those are actually some of personally my favorite people in the space, because they get their hands so dirty and they take ownership of their craft. And I actually really view most of these people as artists. And you can't forget that what we're creating is a form of art. As commercialized as some people make it, or as entertaining as it can be, at the underlying level, it's an individual who is inspired and also leveraged their experience to build something that is a form of art.
And we have a coworker that, is extremely, if we're going to say artist and say engineer, producer, we have a coworker that is incredible in this space. And he actually was an integral part of creating our virtual clubhouse, creating Zero that you saw, our virtual being. So we have a production studio in Atlanta, Georgia. And a lot of people have been asking us, how do you create a virtual influencer? Is it accessible to me? What's the tech behind it? Will you touch a little bit on like our production studio, our style, and then maybe how other people can do it?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. We have in Atlanta, Georgia, we have studios where we're creating virtual content, like virtual beings in video in real time. And we have some incredibly talented individuals on our team. I'm very thankful to say that. And it's funny because there's only so many people in this space who can really operate at that capacity. And it comes from the fact that we've been so early on this space that we've been able to centralize like a lot of this talent, onto our team. So I'm just very thankful that we're all able to work together so well, and also, share this early interest. Could you repeat the last part of your question?
Oh, yes. I was just curious about the tech. Like, a lot of people are interested about how they're built, how they're created.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of Unreal Engine, but coming out of Epic Games, the same company that made Fortnite, they have this tool or this platform called Unreal Engine. And believe it or not, actually, we're sitting in an Unreal Engine environment at this moment, right? So you can just see kind of the cool experiences that you can create using this platform, this free software. And the fact is, like, Unreal Engine, I think, is going to change the world. Not no one. There are some platforms that are great comparisons, but I'm starting to see Unreal is just sprinting into the future with the release of Unreal Engine 5. And I'm just, we're thankful to be using that technology as well. There's also other tools like Daz 3D is where we got started with the artists that we've worked with. They use Daz to create virtual models, and there's just like I'll put it this way. These technologies are used to create video games, primarily. But then there's this creative media crowd that came in and said, hey, well, what if we started using this for other purposes? And even though actually Unreal Engine is advertising to the film industry, and they had an integral role in creating Mandalorian, much, not much like this, but on a virtual wall, right? They used a lot of that technology powered by Unreal Engine. So in effect, just these tools that are used to make video games, believe it or not, make video game characters, and in effect, virtual influencers are just video game characters on social media, is one way of looking at it.
Sure. And do you see kind of taking this and bringing it to like a brand perspective, because that's a lot of stuff that we do, kind of working with brands to integrate some of this stuff in, like integrate this medium into a lot of kind of marketing and things of that nature. Do you think, and this is something we were talking about yesterday, do you think it's more beneficial for someone to go create a virtual human and then have that virtual human who has now created influence go to brands? Or do you see brands like the Geico Gecko, like Barbie, being more influential, and do you see brands, like should they make their own?
It comes down to priorities, it comes down to what budgets, it comes down to goals, who you want to reach and why. I would advocate for any brand to create their own and really stake this future, but there is what is like walk, run, sprint, I think is the phrase, something like that. But you can start small by partnering maybe on one post and see how it goes and see how you like the experience of working with the team. And then you work your way up and maybe say, hey, can we create a virtual for maybe a few months? And if you really like that, really stake the future of this potential to create a new being that represents your company, you can do that just like the Geico Gecko did. There was actually a strike at the time the Geico Gecko was made. I believe there was an Actors Guild strike active, and they couldn't film certain commercials. So they said, why don't we make a virtual character that is this lizard? And believe it or not, that lizard was well loved and stuck around from there. And so the potential is still there today to recreate your company under the image of a character. Lou of Magalu, incredible example, has over 50 million fans across social media. 98% of her fans are in Brazil because Magalu is like the Best Buy perhaps of Brazil, or maybe an Amazon of Brazil. I don't know what the best comparison would be, but in effect, this e-com platform is represented by a virtual human named Magalu, and she's like the third most famous virtual human in history. Because they have staked to that future. And now people, when they see Magalu's face on a billboard, they don't even need to see the name Magalu on that billboard to know that this is Lou of Magalu, right? Yeah.
And Christopher is extremely humble, but I know he's throwing out a lot of names. He's created virtualhumans.org, which is a congregate database of all of these virtual influencers. So we're listing off a lot of names. It might get a little bit confusing, but if you go to virtualhumans.org, you can read about how many are on that website?
Now I think there's like 215 that we've documented.
It's a lot. And he's actually, Christopher has interviewed a ton of these virtual influencers. You want to talk a little bit about the interview process? Like how do you...
Sure. Yeah, so in effect, I'll sit down with a virtual character across from them in a chair, perhaps, and talk to them and ask them questions about why they do what they do. And so the whole point of that approach to interviewing a virtual character is to let the creator speak in their art form and like give a new stage to their art, so that if you ask a character a question, I'm actually speaking to the creator and giving them a chance to further their story in that. And so in effect, it's like creating fiction with them. And I think what's most important in those interviews is that I speak to those virtual humans as if they are human, and that creates a new plane of like engagement where they, once you immerse yourself in that, it's very enjoyable, I think. And so that's kind of the goal, is to give these characters another transmedia avenue to express themselves, to further their story, to release new details and whatever it may be. But there's so many opportunities and cool moments that have been created from those interviews, I think.
Sure. Off the cuff, if you were to create a virtual influencer yourself, what would it look like?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, it would look like Zero because we just made him, and that was where the recent inspiration drove us, right? But off the cuff, something, I would create an icon that could appear in the most relatable way possible on any platform possible. I guess that's kind of the goal everyone's trying to pursue. But maybe it would be more androgynous. Maybe it would be out of this world too at the same time. Something that can relate to everyone. Yeah.
Sure. What about, I've seen a lot of singing shows recently.
Oh, yeah.
We've been talking a lot. There's a new singing show out there that no longer is just kind of like The Masked Singer. That was a big show that came out. But there's another one that I've seen before that is actually like a full VR digitized kind of pop star. And we're starting to see a lot of that. Like now it's not just, again, like you got entertainment, you got educational, and now you have these like music icons coming out of the virtual influencer space. Can you talk a little bit about some of the musical pop icons you've seen?
Yeah, there's this one character named Apoki out of South Korea, or Apoki. She's a rabbit. She has these really big pink ears. She dances on TikTok, but she has really good music. Like she releases this like incredible music through this character. And the weird thing is I'm referring to her as she, right? Like she has developed a persona as this being of a dancing rabbit that makes really visually stimulating music videos with good music, is emerging as a star in South Korea. And for all intents and purposes, she is an idol and she could become a celebrity. And I don't know, you could say that 100 times over. It might still sound strange, but you can create a celebrity without a human centerpiece. And that's where we're moving. And I think that's going to continue to be the future. And so you see this in the music industry. A lot of people are getting very innovative in that space. Ruby Gloom is a great example of another one. She's worked with all sorts of brands and expresses herself through CGI, but she's really layered CGI atop herself to make her look more virtual, to the point that she's practically fully virtual now. Like it's almost like she has transitioned into becoming virtual and messes with reality all the time. But she also has now just gotten into music, which just goes to show what's coming next for the music industry.
It talks a little bit about like this digital hybrid, right? And in the coming years, someone was saying at Infinity Festival that we were at was in the next 10 years, he was projecting and predicting that everything will have a digital hybrid. Kind of, do you see celebrities following that same trend, building digital versions of themselves? I mean, we've seen it so much with these virtual reality concerts that are happening now.
This is a really interesting question because when a celebrity creates a virtual version of themselves, it's great for a concert maybe today, but as they age out of their appearance, do people still want to follow the memory of that character, or that individual in the past? And so, in effect, I think that and also this is actually a technical thing, is if you try to recreate a celebrity as a virtual, it's so much harder to recreate a human from recreate a human in a virtual space than it is to just create a whole new human, okay? And so, that's a challenging technical question, but you also get into the creative and media application of that is, who's to say that a fan actually wants to follow a virtual version of a celebrity versus their, pet dog that comes into their story that is virtual, I actually think they would see way more success doing that, creating alter egos really. I've thought about that extensively and I think if I wanted to follow the human version of, a virtual version of them, I would just follow the human, yeah.
That makes sense. Let's say I want to go make a virtual human right now myself. What are the resources available to me?
Well, you're going to have some technical familiarity. Like, we're in the virtual world here. Like, we're building virtual experiences, and you're going to need to know, a little bit about technology. But that said, there are so many softwares becoming available to you that allow you to create, virtual experiences. Unreal Engine's the highest lift to get into this space. Lowest lift are VTuber softwares. Softwares where you can plug and play with like a green backdrop, and OBS is another software that would help. Maybe use a Ready Player Me avatar. Ready Player Me is a really incredible platform that is building. You can create an avatar that is integrated into hundreds of different apps. So when you show up at a game, you can show up with the avatar that you designed once. It's like a set it and forget it, or set it, customize it, etc. But the whole idea there is, why should I open up a video game and have to go through the 15-minute process of making a character every single time when I could make one universal character and then port it into different places? So if you want an avatar like today, go to Ready Player Me, and it's actually socially relevant. You can use it in VR chat. You can use it in so many other different apps. But yeah, that's a very fascinating concept, this idea of a universal, almost like SDK of a being, and what that could mean for identity moving forward, because it's going to get exhausting if there's 50 platforms and you have to make 50 avatars that you have to manage. Yeah.
Sure. And so, like, I have one more question for you. Last question. If you could give one nugget about the future of the virtual human kind of trajectory, what would you say? Where is this industry going? Where do you predict this is going to be in 5, 10 years? We've talked a lot about the implications, digital hybridity. Like, what's next for you in the digital influencer space, if you'd want to talk more like centric versus?
Yeah, I would really just like to onboard more people to the metaverse, I would say. That's like a simple way of putting it, is make it easy, make it easy to find the information, make it transparent to who's working on what, make sure we're promoting concepts of ownership. Like, NFTs are great for that. That's why I'm a recent like deep fan of the tech behind NFTs, is that ownership and portability element to it. You've never really been able to say that with confidence before, that I could own this virtual being and I can move this virtual being to a new platform. So personally, I just want to make sure everyone's learning about these things in the simplest way possible, which is actually why I built virtualhumans.org in the first place, was to document, cultivate, empower the industry and its creators. And I think that I'm really only just skimming the surface with that. I think there's so many levels deeper you can go. So that's kind of where my head's at. Maybe for the next 5, 10 years, I could create something that like really impacts the industry at large as this on-ramp perhaps to the space, be that through creating new media, creating a platform, whatever it may be, to help people like immerse themselves, both fans and creators. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thanks again for having us here. I'm Max Harberg. I'm with Strategy with Offbeat Media, and Christopher Travers, co-founder and chief creative officer. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.